doesn't care about you. That's why you need a medical emergency kit. It contains life-saving medications like ivermectin, Z-Pak, and antibiotics. Stock them before they block them.
I'm David Cross, and you may know me from my election integrity work, but I also own U.S. Asset Management, an investment advisory practice. I've been an advisor for nearly 30 years, and one of the questions I get asked most frequently is, do I have enough money relative to other people my age? And while that's an interesting question, it's also the wrong question. The right question is do you have enough money to sustain your lifestyle for the rest of your life? This is a question you should know the answer to. This is what we do. Check us out at us-am.com and look for our big proud American Eagle logo.
We're going to go ahead and bring Emerald in now. Emerald Robinson, how are you?
Good. It's good to see both of you all. How you doing, gentlemen?
Hey, doing all right. Hey, you know, we were talking about this earlier. Some of the things that we see that are these attempts to try to undermine what Trump's doing, what Trump's trying to do. He's certainly put people around him, or he's attempting to put people around him that can go in and flesh some of this stuff out. But there's so many rats in this, in this space that he's having to chase out. But I saw something that you wrote that was really kind of interesting. You were following something that I'd followed, this trail of potential evidence destroying, something that's going on at DOD and FBI. I'm not surprised, but I'm interested in what your thoughts are on this.
It's not surprising at all. In fact, I think that, and I think they did anticipate, right? I think this is what this shows, what we're all hearing is that the Trump team anticipated that that's exactly what they were going to be doing. We know it was happening before Inauguration Day, but it sounds like they were prepared to go in and look for them destroying evidence as early as day one. We knew they were going to do this because we were not aware of everything that the intelligence community, the Pentagon, the FBI has taken part in, but we know enough, and we know that they've been dirty for a long time. And I had already been hearing from my sources in Washington, D.C. that there was sheer panic of Donald Trump taking over, and he did seem different and what he might do, because I mean, people deserve to, at the very least, they deserve to go to jail. Yeah. What we're talking about is really treasonous behavior, and it's not just you or I saying that. You have a sitting member of Congress, Representative Anna Paulina Luna, who tweeted out, or whatever you call it these days, posted recently that there is a war in the intelligence community, and that there are people who are guilty of treason. Yeah. So what is surprising me maybe a little bit is that the war is obvious this time. For those of us who paid really close attention before, we knew there's been an ongoing war for some time. There's been an ongoing coup, but more people are aware this time, and I think that's what's particularly encouraging.
Emerald, do you think independent media is a big part of that? What you're talking about? Because there was an article that came out yesterday that said independent media is the most powerful force in the world right now. What are your thoughts?
I absolutely agree with that. I mean, look at what we're reporting. And we know now why, we knew, but we know even more now why legacy media doesn't report these kind of stories. Whistleblowers are actually undermined. True whistleblowers, they're disparaged in the legacy media. And that's because not only were these people ideologically aligned or just, wanted to be part of the machine, they were actually getting paid to do it, right? Politico, Reuters. I mean, how many others? Yeah. Really good money.
Yeah.
And you knew that because their viewership wasn't really there. I had assumed a lot of it because I also know that when you play the game, when you will play the game, it doesn't matter what your ratings are. They'll make sure that the advertisers are there. So the advertising is not even, in broadcast, it's not even really tied to the viewership. No. That's a little known secret to the American people. But yeah, it's hard. And it's so, look at a lot of the people that Donald Trump sent in too. They were active in independent media over the 4 years that he wasn't in office. And there's more people for whistleblowers to go to that aren't afraid to go out and share the message. Anyone who's in corporate, they have their lawyers. They're much more hesitant to share the information. But those of us out in this wild, wild west of independent media were like, we verify it. And we're like, let's go. It's the truth.
Yeah.
You know what? What's interesting to me, though, is the level of the quality of sourcing and reporting that
Mhm.
we're getting on X. I mean, I've started following people. I'm an old Intel guy. All I do is I know a source when it's either they're either giving good stuff and it ends up coming, I'm able to prove it and it comes true, or this person doesn't have access. But if they have access, and I'm starting to see more and more people on X that when I see what they do, and then 2 and 3 days later, I start seeing other reporting that corroborates this, I know that this person's got some kind of access. So I start following them closer, of course. But my point being is I'm seeing more and more of that. It used to be you'd see stuff on social media and go, I'm not sure about that. That sounds kind of, but now I see stuff now and I'm like, I could probably put money on some of this stuff right off the bat. What are you saying?
Well, I agree. And just take, for instance, I'd been hearing what I heard about the evidence destroying, I've been hearing at the Pentagon and the CIA.
That's what I've heard.
I hadn't talked to anyone at the FBI yet or anyone from within the FBI. So I had heard it from enough sources. I'm telling you, it was multiple sources. And were not just any sources. They were high level. But of course, you need to see something. So I couldn't go out there and say definitively this is happening. And that's why I
Right.
put it out there as sort of a rumor, because I knew that if I was hearing it from this many people and the kind of
Okay.
people that I was hearing it from, I assumed there were probably other people hearing the same thing. I put it out there and that's what happened, right? So we're able to kind of work together in this
Yes.
space and help corroborate each other's information. I put it out there and what was it? I mean, maybe within the next hour, other
Yeah.
people were reporting and adding details that they had heard. And then you had Garrett O'Boyle, one of the FBI whistleblowers, go on, I believe it was Benny Johnson. And I'm not sure that's what they'd even set up to talk about. But he said, hey, they're destroying evidence at the FBI,
Yeah.
and went into great detail, which I wasn't even on the FBI at the time. So it all kind of came together, like you said, in the X space. And what I have found, this is what I really found through elections, covering election fraud, and the average, I don't like to say average, but people who aren't in media, who are not investigative reporters, who are not lawyers, they were the ones doing the best work on investigating election fraud, whether it was Pennsylvania, Georgia, Arizona, and they were doing it. They were meticulous with their work. They were doing real investigations. And I can tell you that sitting in the corporate media for how many years I did, I didn't see that level of detail in their investigations. And not even from, the paper of record, the New York Times with prides itself on it, right? They didn't do that kind of. They were just stenographers and taking the propaganda from the Intel state that the Intel state wanted to turn around and use as a predicate to do their faux investigations.
Yeah, the independent media is kind of like a matrix of pressure. Like when you release that, everybody else comes around and it forces action because they can't like single out one or two people because it's like a herd of stuff. But what about the generals? I had read that they were destroying evidence in the Pentagon. Have you heard anything about that?
Okay, so I can tell you what I heard.
I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but go ahead.
No, it's okay. No, I was just saying it's great too, because when we swarm, because social media has become so powerful, then you get the call from from the agency, from the official spokesperson at the agency that used to be so hard to get a hold of. You all know how this is. They avoid you for days, but because so many people are piling on because of what you reported or what you said, they pick up the phone and call you now. I heard, Todd, that at least one high-level general, former Pentagon official, very high level. You know what? I can go ahead and say it because somebody else put this out there too, because they obviously had heard what I heard, that it was CQ Brown, the former head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, that they're saying, he's gone because of DEI, but there was more to it, that he was actually found destroying evidence. Again, this is from multiple sources. I have not confirmed this with the Pentagon. I have not heard back from them on this. I keep calling the line, but I haven't heard back. But other people are reporting this as well.
Which can be a tell in and of itself, too, by the way. If
Sometimes
they're
when
avoiding
they don't say anything, they
you
say so much.
right. That can be saying a lot by the fact that their silence is there. Let me ask you real quickly. Did you follow any of this stuff from James O'Keefe? now. He on the same thing with the Pentagon. In fact, when they got rid of CQ Brown, but also cleared the rest of the Joint Chiefs out of there, or the majority of them. But one of the reasons being is because they were meeting in a confined, secured place and planning on how they're going to resist and oppose Trump and Trump's orders. This guy that, James O'Keefe, he gets people on, of course, on camera talking out of school, of course. And then this thing kept going and building until this point where we finally saw them. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, he was ahead of the curve, but this is what was going on in the first administration, right? But we just didn't have eyes in there like this. They planned to enact another coup. This is nothing more than a coup. And I think it expands beyond their borders based on other information that I heard. There's questions as to where is John Brennan? Okay. Nobody's heard from Brennan since, I believe, Election Day. He last posted on social media on Election Day. There are unconfirmed reports that he's out of the country and currently sitting in a country that is part of the Five Eyes. You got to remember, Five Eyes was very instrumental in Russiagate.
Sure.
So that is part of all of this. I've heard, and this is not my reporting, but I saw someone else reporting that Hegseth had let go of multiple JAG attorneys that were a part of this coup. So it's kind of amazing what we're hearing is going on behind the scenes. There's been no pushback on it. There's multiple people reporting it. James O'Keefe has it on the record, right? That's on the record. That's coming from the horse's mouth. So you can't deny that. But they're struggling. And I don't know. I'll ask you all. I feel like, too, this time around, it seems like there's a struggle to control the narrative from these people, right? The CIA, the subversive members of the FBI, because they're still in there, that have their media leaks to the legacy media. It seems like they are discombobulated, like they're thrown off.
Well, you know what did that, Emerald, is the money, I think, because the money's
I think so too.
So
I mean,
they can't pay people off to do what they normally do, right?
Yeah, and going to what you said earlier, Emerald, this I'm telling you, Doge going in there early on, and Elon Musk, he was in there doing this. I bet they were already doing a lot of this during the campaign. For him to have this much clarity on money flows and money laundering and channeling of these funds. I mean, he went straight to Treasury, and where was the first place he went? USAID. He knew right off the bat where all the fraud was. That was step 2. It wasn't DOE. It wasn't Social Security. It was straight over to USAID. And now you're seeing it, because once you choke off that money, well, we just heard Orban last week. He came out and he said Soros is running around Brussels trying to raise money right now so that they can do these exiled operations. What I refer to as, this is the deep state going offshore, but they're going to continue attacking Trump.
Yeah, John's been on that. That was, you were talking about that a month ago, John.
Yeah, and so I think what Todd said, this money has hit these people hard on this narrative. What do you think?
John, I think you're very astute to notice that they went to USAID first, or second, right off the top. I had some conversations with some members of the transition, and they had come out. They had previously been at the Trump State Department in the first term, and their focus was USAID. We have to do something about USAID. They were also wondering who they would put in there. And then what you saw them settle on, apparently, is just going in and kind of wiping it out. I know there's still people sitting on the wings who will go in at USAID. They're not going to totally terminate it. But these are really good people. Right. These are the kind of people you want in there. So that's encouraging. And you mentioned Orban. I've had calls from different officials in multiple countries. I mean, a country in Africa, Ukraine, Romania, you name it. I probably at least half a dozen countries, government officials, and one in Latin America calling and saying this you don't understand how thrilled we are about this cutting of the USAID funding, and saying what they believe has happened in their country because of this money. So this is a shot heard around the world, and it's really getting met with much praise. So you don't see that a lot in the media, because we've used that money to do some pretty terrible stuff across the globe and disrupt democracies.
No, you're exactly right. You're exactly
sure.
right.
For
You
sure.
know, we've got to go to a quick break. Emerald, can you stay with me for one more segment?
Sure.
Because I have something I want to get into with you about Pam Bondi and what's coming up today.
Okay.
Can you stick around?
Sure.
See you on the other side. Back. We have Emerald Robinson from The Absolute Truth. That's her show. She joins us now. Happy to have her on board. We've dragged her into the next segment here, but for a reason. Look, I have seen more people on social media just blow up about this whole Epstein thing. They've said enough. Yeah, you've got it on she came out and she says, I've got it on my desk. We're reviewing. And then everybody just came out and said, we've had plenty of review. We've had plenty of time. Those documents have already been out there. And I heard some FBI guy on one of the other stations, and it was kind of, he's trying to explain to all of us rubes out here why we can't know what we pretty much already know. We just want to confirm it. Who was going to that island and why? And he's trying to explain all the legalese about it. We got to get that from the FBI guy. But at the end of the day, I don't know. I think this stuff. So she came out yesterday and says, we're getting it out today. What do you think?
Some information. Some.
Well, that's what the caveat, right? That's not what we asked for. That's not the mandate that the American people gave Donald Trump when they voted him in large part for transparency. We've heard this long enough, especially as it relates to Epstein, and no one's forgotten that Epstein actually was suicided under Trump's Attorney General Bill Barr. Nobody thinks that was accidental.
No.
So there's not a lot of trust there, even for Pam Bondi, who people, supported and liked. She seemed very, very nervous in her television appearances. Last night, I was watching her body language. I'm pessimistic about it. I don't think we're going to see much that we want to see. I think there's multiple reasons for it. I think in part is that is probably relates to who, not just who was on Epstein's client list, but who was his boss, who was he working for?
Who was setting up, who was blackmailing people. What was the agenda? That's what you're getting at, I think.
Yeah, because let's think about it. Who was one of his very frequent guests who said that he visited Epstein in his New York townhouse over, I think, 37 times, but he wasn't going there for sex. That was the Israeli official, former spy chief Ehud Barak. So you got the former head of Israeli intelligence going to Epstein's all the time, not for sex. He was very clear on saying that. And he was introduced to Epstein by a former Israeli president. So I think, especially at this time that we're in, where they're trying to get a peace agreement, and settle this conflict in the Gaza Strip.
This isn't good.
It is Israel. That's going to affect how American people feel about whatever agreement they come to and what they want Israel to get in that agreement. Then there's also the problem of, I'm not surprised by much these days, but I suspect there might be a couple names that surprised me. It would be very exciting to Republicans.
Well, and I heard somebody yesterday say, look, you may even see names of people on there that even Trump's had, relationships with. And, but, if you're,
I think
you're probably going to have relationships with somebody somewhere. You're probably once removed from somebody. But my point being is that I think you're right that, there isn't anybody with that's been following this whole Epstein thing that doesn't understand what that was. Just like this NASA or this NSA sex chat thing. This thing was nothing but a capture point. It's a point for the deep state to use, because when you get on there and you start doing the bad things you're going to say and do on there, they can use it against you when they need you to do.
She said that you're going to get some flight logs and some names, which, that's like the low hanging fruit, right? The upper agenda is what we're not going to get at this point.
At this point.
Yeah.
And don't you have to wonder, does all the evidence still exist? Didn't the FBI, they seized the tapes from his Palm Beach home. Do they even still exist?
And we know that this evidence was captured. They went down, they seized the whole place.
10 years ago, something.
They talked about it, videos, documents, emails. They talked about all these things. So we know they exist, but like you said, and we've talked to the lead was on this, would they have destroyed any of this stuff? Why not?
I think so.
Yeah, I can't.
I'm not very hopeful about it, and especially as nervous as she looked, because if look, this is, I have seen people who are, are not very critical ever of anything Donald Trump, even sometimes when he deserves criticism, because everybody does, right? We all deserve criticism and course correction from time to time. Say this is unacceptable. Like, you have to release it in full. No more dilly-dallying. We know what congressional committees are for. They're just to play pretend and theatrics and to keep information from us. I think she knows she's going to get a ton of backlash.
Yeah, I do too. Real quickly, I just got a quick thing I want to play for you here. I want you to see it real quickly because that dovetails into what you just said. Look at this real quick.
You were just talking about Afghanistan and the botched withdrawal. Have all the generals or command staff that were involved with the withdrawal been fired or relieved of duty?
Well, that's a great idea. I'm not going to tell this man what to do, but I will say that if I had his place, I'd fire every single one of them, Pete. That's a very good question.
Well, it's a question we've thought a lot about. We're doing a complete review of every single aspect of what happened with the botched withdrawal of Afghanistan and plan to have full accountability. It's one of the first things we announced at the Defense Department for that reason, sir.
I just wanted to get that one in there because you can see Trump's having to tell Hegseth. That was a message. Trump wasn't, he's making a joke out of it. But it sounds like to me, Trump was saying, moving a little slow on this one right here with I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
How many years have we spent looking and dissecting every behavior of this man? Yeah, that was Trump sending a message to Pete Hegseth. That was pretty obvious.
Yeah.
And it's speaking of the generals and the firings and this evidence shredding, there was one source that suggested that part of the evidence that was, being destroyed, some of that was actually related to the Afghanistan withdrawal and some of the actions in Afghanistan.
Yeah, I think they've got some problems there. I do see where, like you said, I think that, like right there. And then right after that, we played a piece where what was funny about that exchange, Emerald, was that the reporter that asked that question was one of the old Fox reporters that worked with Hegseth. So I'm sure Hegseth was real happy. They did Fox
and Friends Saturday. I can't remember his name now, but yeah, he's the guy they send out to the diner.
Right, that guy.
And I was like, and then they moved Hegseth to the couch, and then this guy,
Yeah, so that guy was getting his jabs in on Hegseth now because now that he's moved on. I thought that was kind of funny.
That is interesting. Yeah, you know what? I hadn't even thought about that. You're right.
But you know what was also funny was Rosen. Is it Pete Rosen?
James Rosen.
James Rosen. James Rosen came out and he asks him, says, "Are all these people around here, this whole cabinet of yours, are they expected to carry out your orders and do exactly what you say?" This was right after the Hegseth exchange. He says, yeah, I believe so. And he goes, "Is anybody excused from doing that?" And he goes, "Oh, maybe her." And I think he pointed like at Susie Wiles or somebody. And then he goes, "Well, not even her." And he goes, "Yeah, everybody will follow my orders." And so it was almost a little bit of messaging in this riff he did up on during that whole cabinet meeting that was quite.
Oh, that's telling. The whole narrative. They're trying to the legacy media is trying to say that the DOJ doesn't have to follow him, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah,
and that's what they did the first time around. Remember, and they were able to separate a lot of his officials from him, especially like. Bill Barr, but the defense secretaries, Rex Tillerson, all of them, they said, well, you don't, if you think this is not an order you should follow, the legacy media really pushed them to not follow it. But, it should go without saying, it is sad you'd have to ask that question of the commander in chief, the head of the executive branch, because that's exactly what his powers are. But it's even a more significant question than because not only was it some of these cabinet secretaries the first time around who were, doing their own thing, but you literally had White House aides and legal counsel who would go in and humor him on executive orders that he would think that was getting done, and they would walk out of that Oval Office and they would tell it, they'd throw it in the trash. And blatantly do it even in front of the secretaries, because who told me that was a body man, a former body man of Donald Trump who saw it himself.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, no, and the thing of it is that you see this now, and what you're talking about, this idea. I mean, they tried. The left is always, and they mainly do it around Republicans. You never see them do it to the Democrats. There's got to be some divide, some oversight within his own executive. Oh, the FBI has to be able to be independent, and the DOJ. Give me a break. These people have
let's say for most Democrat administrations, but remember in the last one, the guy wasn't really running things anyway, so they didn't have. They were following what somebody told him to do, but probably not Joe Biden, who was,
was not cognizant at all. And then just, I mean, that's a tough one. But you know that it always aligns when they're Democrats, but it doesn't when they're you got to have this oversight of the president when it's a Republican for some reason.
Well, tells you how desperate the administrative state is. That it's supposed to always be the same, right? That the policy is always supposed to be the same, no matter who's in office. It just tends to be the ideology and the policy that most aligns with the Democrats.
Exactly. One last question real quickly here on these judges. You had these two that I think SCOTUS came out yesterday and said, no, they get to release they get to block the funds that Trump wants to block, these USAID funds. But you had these two judges that look like I can't even. Anyway, Amir Ali and Lauren Ali Khan, they were the two. We reported on one of them yesterday. They're your two judges, new district court judges, that somehow thought they had the authority to tell the chief executive of the United States of America he can't block funds to places that were, I'm sorry, they don't even make sense. It shouldn't even be foreign funds. So you have these two judges. SCOTUS came out last night, I think, and said, nah, he gets to block them. What are your thoughts on that?
Look, we have a real problem. I'm glad I actually hadn't seen the news out of SCOTUS yet, but that's encouraging. You said they said that Trump can block the funding, that the judges can't.
SCOTUS put a temporary hold on their ruling and said he can block.
Well, it's temporary. Okay.
Yeah. For now is what they said, but
I wish it had been a little stronger than that.
One of those one judge rulings. They have to do the full court. Yeah.
Well, look, if I recall correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, it may not be in this situation, but at least in one of the situations where they're, doing a legal challenge to Trump actions, one of them has dual citizenship. Yeah. I mean, how can you? I just think that as there's been a Marxist communist revolutionary takeover of the administrative state, so has been our judiciary, right? And that's where we're really seeing the problem. That's where it's kind of harder to root it out. And in some ways, you have a Republican Senate to thank for that. Yeah. They were confirming these. I mean, we're not just talking about left leaning. We're talking about full on communist judges all the way up to the very end. And if they didn't show up to vote for them, they showed up not to. Hello, Ted Cruz, many times, so that they didn't have to go on the record voting for or against them. They would get through. So we have a real problem. How to address that? I mean, it's something that has to be taken on. I know that there's a lot of suggestion about bringing them in Congress and impeaching them, and at the very least making them publicly answer for rulings like that, or some of this, particularly some of the counter rule of law opinions and actions we saw of judges as it related to the J6 cases. But I'm just not sure the House will actually do that.
So I have a question for you, Emerald, before you go. We've applied to get into the White House and the Pentagon and other places. Are we going to see Lindell TV and you in there shortly?
Oh, we're already in there.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah.
How does that work? Are you rotating, or what is it? How does it work?
So with the Pentagon, I don't have enough staff to put somebody in the Pentagon right now, but we're going to work on that. We're going to do that. And I mean, I really have a really good correspondent that will go in there and actually know what they're talking about and ask really intelligent questions. As far as the White House, we have Kara Castronova. You'll remember her from the Gateway Pundit. And she's already made her way into the Oval Office on her first day. So she was there for the swearing in of RFK as the Health and Human Services Department secretary. And so we've been in there. We're getting to ask some questions. Here's what I'd like to see. I mean, I've been telling people what a mess the WHCA was. They literally voted a tranny as their president.
I know.
And I kept telling, look, I told anybody that would listen to me in Trump world and in the transition team and in, all of his advisors, you can take control of that press room, and you have to, because they're not, it's not freedom of the press. So you're on solid grounding here. You're not just justified. You have a duty to the American people to change that press room. And I think here's what at first I was a little bit concerned, because she started calling on the front two rows. Caroline Levitt did, and though she's doing a great job answering those questions, right? I mean, she's doing fantastic. I just think they should not get preference. But what I think they're slowly doing it, they started at the Pentagon, and now they're slowly, I expect you'll even see a change to the seating chart, which is what needs to happen. And I'm not saying throw all the seats out. I think there could even be a rotation, which is more fair to everybody, right? Sometimes CNN is in the back row, and sometimes they don't have a seat at all. And once every couple of months, maybe they happen to rotate into the front row.
Rotate them in. I agree.
Well,
I agree. There should be full rotation.
If you have any pull, give us a good word.
Yes, we got Bill Quinn's over there waiting in the wings for Bill Quinn, our guy down in Georgia. He's waiting in the wings to get access in there, so it'll be good. Hey, Emerald, thanks for hanging around so long. Really appreciate it. It's been a great discussion. Always good to have you on. I hope you'll come back.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.